Hey guys, welcome to a Tuesday bonus video. Now our regular videos are every Friday, but sometimes we have time for a bonus video, and today we're checking out three-way SLI. We have three GTS 250 video cards with 1 GB of VRAM each. Just last weekend we had a look at two of these in SLI. We used a Phenom 2 dual core and a quad core processor, overclocked it to 4 GHz to see what these video cards can do with a slightly faster processor. We had a look at Windows XP performance, but we quickly found out that those games are not demanding enough, so we installed Windows 10 and we saw some really nice scaling in pretty much all the games that we had a look at. We got close to 100% scaling, which was a really good outcome. I decided to follow up with the three-way SLI straight away. A couple of reasons. Firstly, the system was already complete. I just had to add a third card. But also to keep my memory fresh and be able to compare before and after with the video footage. If I leave too much time between projects, I sometimes forget the details, and then I have to start from zero, so to speak. Also, if I spend too much time on a project, I get a little bit over it, so I want to finish this project and be ready to move on to the next one. So in the background we have a bit of B-roll footage of me taking the system apart, and I often get asked this question: what do I do with all these computer systems? And the answer is pretty straightforward. I really don't have many computer systems in a complete state. I work with parts mostly. You see that I mostly don't use cases. I find them huge inconvenience. It takes ages to build a system in a case, so I appreciate every one of you guys out there who do videos on YouTube building a complete system. It's a lot of work. So I prefer working with parts, and when I'm done with a project, I strip this system and the parts go back in plastic containers and I move on to the next project. So, three-way SLI. So this is definitely one of these bucket list type projects. Back in the day, I would be amazed at seeing such builds. For example, very popular was three-way SLI with 8800 GTX or Ultra video cards. Now, such a system, it was so expensive. Looking at an 8800 Ultra, we're looking at around, over $800, and an 8800 GTX around $650. So buying three of them, it would set you back around $2,000 to $2,400 US. And with three-way SLI, looking at reviews, it wasn't smooth sailing. Not every game scaled well, and some games even ran faster with just 2 cards instead of 3. So I'm hoping for this project that using a fairly decent processor, but also using the latest and greatest NVIDIA drivers, that the three-way SLI experience is not too bad, but we will find out very soon. So let's take a closer look at these three video cards. So they're all from Leadtech, the WinFast GTS 250. We also found out that the clock speeds on this particular model, they're a little bit lower. I didn't have a look at overclocking. It's very likely that you can improve the performance. Not sure if we can get it up to the speeds of the GTS 250 reference. Here we can see all the connectors. I connected the monitor into this DVI port, didn't use any of the other ports. You can definitely see with the cooling, we had quite a few issues with the cooling. You can see how close all the fans are, and initially I ran into some performance issues, and what was happening was that these two cards basically didn't get any cooling, and we saw temperatures over 100 degrees. So I actually removed the stock coolers from here and I put a 120mm fan on top, and that worked just fine. The third card, I just left the stock cooler on there. That didn't cause any issues. At the back we can see we have 3 6-pin PCI Express power connectors. So usually a 600 watt power supply comes with 4 of these and should be good to go. And this is the power supply I'm using. It's a Bitcoin power supply. No name, to be honest. There's a model number on here and you can buy these from Chinese places. And it's very loud. It doesn't have a fan control, but look at the rating, 1480 watts on the 12 volt rail, so that's pretty impressive. And here we can see all the connectors. So firstly, this is a fully modular power supply, but look at all these. We've got 6 PCI Express connectors, and each cable has 2 8-pin PCI Express connectors. So a total of 12 8-pin PCI Express connectors for all sorts of interesting SLI projects. And we will definitely be using this power supply once again in future videos. And this is the motherboard we're using. So this is a Gigabyte 990 FXA UD5 with the 990FX chipset. Has an SLI license. You can see the logo here. Now with the PCI Express lanes, if we're using 2 video cards, both will run with 16x PCI Express lanes. But if you add a third one, the first one will still run with 16x, but card number 2 and card number 3 will drop to 8x. And in your comments, you mentioned that that really isn't an issue. There's almost no difference between 16x and 8x. I haven't done any of my own tests, but I can confirm this with period correct reviews. They mention the same thing, and yep, I'll take your word for it as well. And this is the CPU we're using, the Phenom 2 X4965, running at 3.6 GHz. Worked fairly well for this project with 3-way SLI. I'm not quite sure if this processor is fast enough. You need quite high IPC, and the Phenom is a little bit weak in that regard. I'm having a look at motherboard options to go with something Intel based and SLI, but prices are definitely not cheap, so I'm still looking and seeing what the options are. But I might just go for something extremely modern and go with a Ryzen based system. For example, an X370 chipset, I believe, is the one that supports SLI. And you can buy motherboards for around 140 Australian dollars, brand new. So that's definitely an interesting aspect, but it means I would have to get some DDR4 memory and of course also a Ryzen processor. If you guys have any recommendations for cheap SLI motherboards that are Intel based and a little bit more modern with faster processors, definitely leave some comments down below in the comment section. So I had the Windows 10 installation still on the SSD, so all I had to do was go back into the NVIDIA graphics driver, and we're using the latest and greatest version, and yeah, enable 3-way SLI. We can see a diagram here, all 3 cards are showing up. It even tells you which DVI port you got your monitor connected. Now, I got an error message at first. Apparently some background tasks preventing SLI from being enabled, so you just gotta open Task Manager and kill those tasks, and here we go. It takes around 10 seconds for SLI to fully enable, and now we're gonna have a look at some games. So the first game is Tomb Raider. We have normal details. It's a preset you can configure. We have 16x AF, no AA, and with 2 cards in SLI, we got around 60 to 70 FPS. Now, how about 3-way SLI? Well, the FPS do improve. We're now getting between, anywhere between 80 and to 100 FPS with the same settings. So I tried my luck. I changed the preset to high details, and yeah, we're still getting a fairly smooth experience with FPS between 70 and 90. So Tomb Raider is definitely a game you should check out. If you're building an SLI system, it seems to scale really well, even with 3 cards. So Far Cry 2 was an interesting game. In the beginning of the game, when you start a new campaign, there's a driving sequence, so that's a really good benchmark. And at first, the 3-way SLI system is actually in front of just 2 cards, but over time, it seems to lose speed, and you can see this in the video. The performance lead of the 3-way SLI gets less and less, and later in the video there's a scene where there's almost a collision with a car, and you can now see in that scene that the with 2 video cards in SLI seems to be a little bit faster actually than 3-way SLI. So very strange, not sure what's going on here. I ran out of time to do more tests, so we're gonna move on to the next game. Moving on to Bad Company 2. So once again, we're starting off with 2 cards in SLI. With medium details, we're getting around 60 FPS, but we are seeing dips into the 50s. Both cards are really well utilized. We're getting nice scaling with the scaling figures in MSI Afterburner in the 90s. So let's have a look how 3-way SLI is doing. So with the same details, we're getting 80 to 100 FPS. So that's a nice improvement. We are also seeing great usage, great scaling, all three cards sitting around 90% or so. But there's something that doesn't quite show up in the video. And that is some sort of a rubber banding or input lag that's going on. Most of the time the game is smooth, but every now and then it feels like it's falling behind a little bit when trying to catch up with the frames or something like that. It's a bit hard to explain, but it's definitely not a smooth experience despite the MSI Afterburner showing solid FPS. In Crysis I saw the same issue, but here we can clearly see it happening in the video. Now, the CPU we're using is not really cutting it for Crysis. This game loves high IPC, and the Phantom 2 unfortunately is not that strong in this area. So a highly clocked Intel Haswell system is usually the way to go if you want to max out Crysis. So once again, this is another game where we have some issues with 3-way SLI. Even with 2 or single card, it doesn't run that well on the Phantom 2. You might have to lower the details a little bit. Instead of high or very high, go with medium, because doing that often frees up the processor as well. But Crysis, look, it is a special case. It's a very unoptimized game, so I wouldn't stress too much about that one. Here we have Dirt 3, and this game did really not like 3-way SLI. We are getting lower performance compared to 2 cards. So with 3-way SLI, we're seeing around 60 FPS, but, and I'll put some footage on the screen, with only 2 cards, the game ran a lot smoother with around 70 to 80 FPS. This game is also showing this sort of rubber banding effect. It doesn't come across on the video as well as in Crysis, but it's definitely there. So yeah, that's another game that has this issue, just like Bad Company 2 and Crysis. Also, all 3 cards are not well utilized with only around 50% of GPU load. And the next game we're looking at is Just Cause 2. This was another game that ran well with 2 cards. We saw both cards sitting around 90% of usage. And in terms of FPS, it was a little bit all over the place, up to around 100 FPS, but also dipping into the 50s when there's a lot of action going on. With 3-way SLI, the minimum FPS are now a lot higher, so the whole game runs a lot more consistent. The large dips into the 50s are now gone, and all 3 cards are getting nicely used with around 80 to 90%. So guys, let's talk about the 3-way SLI experience. Personally, it's been a long time coming, and I finally was able to experience what only a select few experienced back in the day. Now, of course, I spent far less money, and as we saw in the games, I don't think I would recommend 3-way SLI to anyone if you actually want to play games. This is definitely something to just play around with and yeah, tick off your bucket list to see what it's like. And yeah, like we saw, the cost is also not trivial. Firstly, you gotta get a decent motherboard that supports 3-way SLI, so they usually go for a premium, and you have to buy 3 identical video cards. And if you add up the price for 3 SLI capable graphics cards, if you pull that money together, you can easily buy a single card that is faster than these 3 cards combined, but will give you a much smoother and smoother experience, but also consume less power, less heat, and you will just get overall a much better experience. Very likely such a single video card will also support the more modern APIs, for example like DirectX 11 or Vulkan. Now there seems to be some sort of a glitch. Tomb Raider, for example, does show DirectX 11, but that's wrong. These cards do not support DirectX 11. As far as I know, the Fermi cards, the 400 series, is the first NVIDIA range of cards that support DirectX 11. The Tomb Raider game definitely stood out. It's a great game for testing SLI. It scales well with 2 and 3 cards, and it's got enough graphical options to give these cards a nice workout. The rest of the games didn't scale well, and most had this weird issue with the frames feeling like they're catching up at certain times. It doesn't happen always. The game is smooth for a while, but then it kind of falls apart a little bit. So definitely quite distracting, and not sure what the reason is. Could be a CPU bottleneck or some other bottleneck in the system going on. I'm not sure if I will ever find out. Getting a 3-way SLI capable system from Intel. Looking at the prices at the moment on places such as eBay or AliExpress, it's definitely not a cheap endeavor. But because this is my first time trying out 3-way SLI, I don't have too much experience, and I don't have like another project to compare this to. So yeah, maybe there's just a weakness going on or a setting I didn't turn on. If you have experience with 3-way SLI and it worked better for you, or maybe you ran into the same issues, do let me know. I'm very interested to get your experience and see what we can do for future video projects. The power supply also did a good job. In general, power consumption is not that great with 3 cards. I saw around 400 to 500 watts on the power meter when playing games, so you should be definitely looking at getting a 600 or 700 watt power supply if you're interested in trying out 3-way SLI. And that's pretty much it for this video. So on the one hand, I was happy to see everything work quite smooth to a certain degree. Like I didn't have any crashes or major issues. And yep, you gotta give some respect to NVIDIA for having pretty solid technology in this regard. This is old tech and it still works under Windows 10, fully supported. So that is quite good, to be honest. Tomb Raider scales really well, but the other games definitely had some issues, and yeah, I'm hoping to figure out what's going on here, where the issue lies. But that's pretty much it for this video. So this was our bonus video for Tuesday. Our regular videos will continue on Friday, and hopefully you found this interesting. Leave your opinions and your comments down below. Always eager to hear from you guys. And yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this project interesting, be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I shall see you soon. Actually, on Friday. I will see you on Friday with another video.